Join us as we swarm the polls.
Join the Hornets as we swarm the polls in the 2020 election.
Hornet Sports and Entertainment is committed to doing our part in assisting our community with the electoral process.
Through informing and educating, driving registration, and encouraging voter turnout. Let your voice be heard.
Join the Hornets as we swarm the polls in the 2020 election.
Good evening. On behalf of the Levine Museum of the New South, I welcome you to our program tonight, Swarm the Polls. My name is Kama Pierce, and I am Chief Operating Officer at the museum. And just to give you a little history of how we got here tonight, about a year ago, we were approached by an organization, the School of Good Citizenship, to partner with them as we march to our presidential election, which is in 12 days. And part of that partnership, we had done an exhibit together. It's called Counting Up What's on Your Ballot. And we chose local artists who actually portrayed some great art around voting rights and what it means to them. That exhibit is still up at the museum and will be up for the next 2 weeks, but we also have it digitally on our website. So I invite you to enjoy that. In addition to the exhibit, we also committed to do 3 programs together. And this is the final program of the programs that we've done around voting. And it could not be a more appropriate program. And I am just so excited for tonight. We are partnering with the Hornets organization. You just saw that great clip of the work that they're doing in the community for us. And this is a nonpartisan conversation. Voting is about all of us, regardless of your political party. Our ancestors fought really hard to give us this right, from our founding fathers during the colonial times to people of color and to immigrants seeking citizenship. It is a very important part of being an American citizen, and we are happy to come today and discuss that. So over the past several years, voting has become increasingly more important, but never more so than I think this election, because under the backdrop of the pandemic, we have really had to grapple with some important issues around, the integrity of voting, the safest way to vote. And the Charlotte Hornets have opened their doors as an early voting site for the first time. And they've been engaging the community through their Swarm the Polls initiative. Tonight, we get to discuss the historical intersection of sports, social justice, civic engagement, and the influence of those in today's conversations. And I am not going to, on our website, I'll just direct you to that. We have the bios of all of our panelists and our wonderful moderator tonight. So I know we want to get to the discussion, so I just want to direct you to the website. But it is my pleasure to start this program by bringing up Miss Jessica. Miss Jessica is the girl next door. She co-hosts the Morning Madhouse at WPEG and Power 98. And Miss Jessica, I always love having you with us. Thank you so much for lending us your energy and your skills, and you have a good conversation.
It is always an honor to be hanging out with my Levine family. Thank you so much for having me and including me in such an important and timely conversation. Very, very excited about this one.
Have fun.
Thank you. Yes. We have a wonderful, I'm so excited to chat with these people. I've been sitting up here prepping for this one. This is an important conversation. We've been seeing this play out day to day. So let's get right to it. Joining us today, we have the head coach of your Charlotte Hornets. I hope Big Pat would be proud of me with that one. Coach JB, how are you doing?
I'm doing great. Thanks for having me.
I have on my Charlotte Hornets gear.
I like that gear. You're repping the next gear. Yeah, I need one of those. I don't even have one of those.
Oh, okay. Well,
you might know some people. So.
Also joining us for today's conversation, Miss Betsy Mack. She is the Executive Director of the Charlotte Hornets Foundation and the Senior Director of Corporate and Social Responsibility for the Hornets. Hello, Betsy.
Hello. Thanks for having me. Very excited to be here tonight.
And that's my new Instagram friend. Hey, girl.
Hello.
Also joining us, the sports guy, Dr. Jamal Ratchford. He is a historian, a sports studies scholar, and a professor at Colorado College.
Good evening, everyone. Thanks for having me. How are you? How are you?
Wonderful. Thank you for having us. I mean, we have a panel full of experts, so let's get right down to it. This election will be, no matter how you look at it, a historic one. So it is important that everyone that can get out to the polls and vote this year. The Hornets, they realize that. So they've started this wonderful initiative called Swarm the Polls. Betsy, tell us all about it.
Absolutely. So we're really excited about this initiative. And to be honest, it's actually a part of a bigger approach. So this is a part of our social justice platform that we'll be more formally announcing in January. And so we have 4 focus areas within that social justice platform. We have racial equity, economic mobility, justice reform, and then, of course, voting. So when we came together and talked about voting, we actually opened it up to the organization to ask if there was any individuals that were interested, anyone who wanted to help us to formulate what this looked like. At the time, it was just called our voting campaign. And we're really proud to say that 25 different individuals from every department, every level across the organization came together, volunteered their time to rally around this cause, so that from leadership on down, this was something that was created throughout the DNA of our organization, where we could really create this initiative that we all really felt proud of. And I think everyone coming together, we've done a great job in doing that. And so the whole initiative is about getting people out to the polls, educating, informing, and showing up.
So for the first time, the Hornets Arena is open. People can go there and they can early vote. And this is going on right now.
It is, yes.
Okay.
So we're really excited about that piece. I mean, we closed our doors in mid-March, mid-season, canceled concerts and games and a lot of other things that were happening. When we opened up the doors, we were really proud that it could be for voting, and really proud that it could be a part where we can do our civic duty, bring everyone together for this cause to hear your voice. It's going wonderfully. We have 40 different polls that people can come in and vote on. It's open through October 31st. All of the hours are listed on the website, hornets.com/go vote. But it's been great. We've been really excited that we're able to host this.
And it's not only just about getting people to the polls. When you get to the polls, you have to be, before you get to the polls, you have to be educated. You have to have the information about that. And you all are providing that for our community.
Yeah, we sure are trying to. We've been going out into the community in different neighborhoods every Wednesday. Our team has led some great events where we're out at different restaurants, we're out at different breweries, educating, informing, giving information, helping people to register. So it's like I said, it's a multifaceted approach that we're hoping helps really make a difference here in the Carolinas. And obviously in North Carolina, where we know we're a little bit of a swing state. So we just want everyone to share and use their voice.
Well, hand claps to the Charlotte Hornets for using their platform on something that's so important right now. African Americans, we have been working to dismantle the systems that uphold racism for centuries. And with the recent killings of people like George Floyd and Breonna Taylor, the attention to the movement is very amplified right now. And professional athletes, especially the NBA and the WNBA, I can't forget about my sisters over there doing their thing. They are really using their platform as an outlet for activism and social justice awareness. But generations before this, like my parents, they saw this happening with athletes like Muhammad Ali, who also used his platform. Dr. J, how has the intersection of social justice and sports impacted society in the past?
Thank you, Ms. Jessica. If I can just say just a few comments. The spirit of my comments tonight are really rooted in Student Nonviolent Coordinating Committees, also known as SNCC. They had initiatives in the early 60s called Freedom Days and Freedom Vote, which essentially said that irrespective of any debilitating weather or intimidation or harassment, that Black citizens in particular were committed to the vote. And as Fannie Lou Hamer said, if I can paraphrase her, we do this struggle to register and to vote to receive first-class citizenship. So I want to just mention that. I want to mention that I hope that my comments tonight sincerely honor Johnson C. Smith alum, like yourself, Ms. Jessica, and gold medalist, and I argue a patriot who hasn't been honored that way, Vince Matthews, as well as the late Wayne Collette, as patriots that honorably competed for Team USA, 1968, 1972 Olympic Games. If our president can conduct during the national anthem, there's videos of this, jovially conduct during the national anthem and still come out unscathed as a patriot, then I believe it's time that there's restitution for Vince Matthews. And before I begin, I just do want to quickly and briefly acknowledge a few people: Dr. Willie Griffin, my fellow Morris brother Alex, the Levine Museum, Michael Jordan, Fred Whitfield, for the excellent work that you all are doing, the clinic that just came out. I mean, it's fantastic news. I certainly commend my fellow panelists. Betsy, congratulations on your first book. Also, as a product of the Northside Boys and Girls Club in San Jose, California, the work that you're doing to impact children, to impact our youth is incredibly powerful. The work that you've done on Mr. Street is incredibly powerful. I encourage everyone at home to look up a story, because I think tonight we need to talk about serious and difficult issues. I think we need to talk about patriotism, intersections of military service, and intersections of the national anthem with sport. So I encourage everyone at home to Google search 2 words, veteran ants. And there was a story of a veteran who served in the Air Force during a war we should have never fought in Vietnam. And he was covered in ants on 2 different occasions, red fire ants, without any supervision, on September 2nd and September 5th. He died on the 7th. His name was Joel Marable. That man was my father. So I was very touched by the story you did on Mr. Street. And finally, last but certainly not least, Coach JB, it was great talking to you earlier. I think your credentials as a coach is well documented, but also being the first Latino coach in NBA history puts you, in my regard, in esteem with people like Julie Menendez, who coached the 3 final NCAA boxing championships in 1957 through 59 at San Jose State. He also coached Muhammad Ali in 1960 games, as well as Sinan Baldi Castillo, who coached the national championship track and field team at Arizona State in 1977. I want to thank everybody that tuned in to this important discussion, including those on the opposite side of the political and ideological aisle. My goal is not to convert you, but to expose you to different ways of considering difference in our nation. And I welcome and acknowledge your humanity here, even if my personal beliefs propose that to make America great again, support tacitly, implicitly, and complicitly devolves and destroys my humanity. And lastly, but certainly not least, I have to acknowledge my heart and soul, my reason for living, my reason for existence, the greatest gifts of my life, my children. I'm so grateful to be your father, and I'm thankful that you're here with me today. So we have a lot to discuss today. You asked a very good question in terms of intersections of sport in this particular moment. I staunchly argue that we're in a visibly and viscerally anti-intellectual moment as a nation. Millions of Americans that have never read an article, a book, taken a course or a series of courses, validate ill-equipped, ambiguous, and uninformed opinions and perhaps memes on any and everything. And it's postured as a substitute for empirically sound work. The lives that we've lost during COVID have mirrored almost 4 times the amount of American losses in Vietnam. We're actually at the same amount of lives lost in terms of South Vietnamese and North Vietnamese people. Yet these pathologies, and I would also argue there's a pathological fascination on Blackness. I have to set the stand. I have to set conceptually a stand before we have this conversation. It's incredibly important. These words are mine and mine alone. But I would argue there's a pathological fascination with Blackness. Mentally, physically, sexually, violently, psychologically, we're constructed as criminals, and I can validate that if we had more time to do so. There's people that you need to know. Americans that don't know these names. Someone like George Lee of Mississippi, who was a preacher, a Christian man in an allegedly Christian nation, who told his congregation to vote, and he was shot down only months before Emmett Till. In between that death, there was someone like Lamar Smith, who was a veteran, 63-year-old, a farmer, who was gunned down in broad daylight, also in Mississippi, with the sheriff watching. Or someone like Fannie Lou Hamer, who tried to register to vote. The sheriff told him to go back, and 10 days after that, a home that she was staying in was shot up. Someone like Ella Baker, the mother of SNCC at Shaw University in Raleigh, one of my sheroes, one of my mentors, if you will, and someone that I look at in terms of what mentorship meant. And I think we need to think about sport in a very particular kind of way. And I think we need to think about our nation in a particular kind of way. If I can just say just a few more words. I argue that this important kind of moment we're in is rooted in what Martin Luther King in his first I Have a Dream speech at Cobo Hall positioned as psychological death, what Robert Williams of Monroe, North Carolina called a moral cowardice, and what I frame as the perils of American knowledge production. And I think American knowledge production, and I'm going to get to sport in just a second, is incredibly potent. I'm interested in American knowledge production and its relationships with time, people, and space. Knowledge production that we consume in palatable ways that allegedly provide universal and objective truths about the ways in which we see ourselves. So I would challenge everyone that's listening at home tonight, you don't have to believe me. Type in George Washington right now to your Google search bar. Click on whitehouse.gov and see what narrative pops up. He was a Virginia planter who practiced and believed in the morals and manners of what it meant to be a Virginia gentleman. He valued the military arts and Western expansion. He valued self-determination against a British tyrant and foe. He longed to return to his fields and his home at Mount Vernon. He urged against excessive party spirit. That's a particular type of message and narrative that we are to consume. So what you will not see on that website is that 8 of our first 12 presidents owned slaves while they were in office, 10 of our first 12 presidents owned slaves, 12 presidents owned slaves, 50 of our first 60 years feature a slave-holding president. So I would argue, and we can come back to it later, we need to think about not only our nation in terms of American knowledge production, but we need to think about sport as a production of knowledge. We typically only think about sport as a leisurely, meritocratic space that has no value, but we need to think about it as a way in which that it's produced knowledge. And I want to come back to this a little bit later in terms of Jackie Robinson, in terms of Ray Norton, the world's fastest man, another. I'm sorry for taking so much time, but I have to lay that foundation in terms of American knowledge production because I think it's incredibly potent. And it intersects directly in terms of how we think about sport and how we should be thinking about sport is not just some leisurely space, but a place that produces knowledge that we consume. I will come back to your question. I'm sorry for not completely answering that.
No, you're fine. You're fine. Thank you. Thank you very much. And for anybody that is watching, if you see me sort of pull out my phone, I'm not texting. I'm actually taking notes. I mean, when you have a panel like this, you got to take notes on some things, and you're giving us some great information to, after that we have this conversation, go back and Google and learn about. And like you said, using the sports platform as a place to gain some knowledge. My question to you was going to be to talk about some of the athletes, some of the people that have used their platform to move social justice.
Absolutely.
And you gave us some examples, but before we come back to that question, one of the examples that you gave us is our very own Coach JB, who we can proudly say, as the home of the Charlotte Hornets, we have the first Latino head coach in NBA history. I mean, that is huge. Congratulations to you. And you're breaking barriers. So how do you handle the intersection of sports and social justice with what's going on in the world today, with you also being the first Latino head coach in the NBA history?
Well, thank you for having me. I could listen to Dr. Jamal all day long. I took my own notes. I'm going to go back and review this film just like I do study a game plan. That's powerful. That's real. And more than anything at this point, at this time, I've spent this time, the last 6-8 months, educating myself, starting with myself. Even though I'm proud of, where I've come from, where I'm at, being the first Latino, I'm proud of that. I'm proud to work in an organization that values diversity, opportunity, progressiveness, and to work for a league that does the same. I'm proud of our league. I'm proud to work for an owner that sees the big picture, that's impacting our community, that's investing in our community. And it's my job to continue that dialogue. And as a leader of this organization, as a leader in our community, my number one focus right now is on education. Educating myself, educating our players, having discussion, having dialogue. I've been so moved by amount of conversation I've had with our players, the pains, the struggles, the hurts, listening to them, and continue to provide a platform to be heard. And I think that's what this is really about. This initiative by the Hornets is pushing the vote. Get out to vote. We're not telling you who to vote for, but getting out to vote. Educate yourself on impacting your community, being a part of something bigger than yourself. And it's our job. It's our duty. And I've shared this with our players, and it's resonated with our players that just like a team, we all have to do our part to be successful. We all have to do our part. And it's been amazing listening to our players. I think we've had one player vote on our current roster. It's amazing. One player on our roster has voted. This will be a huge success. And every one of our players is registered to vote. Every one of our players is out there voting. They were at the Spectrum Center yesterday. I'm going to vote tomorrow. I'm so excited to get out there and vote. So that's been extremely important. We want to get out there. We want to be about, empowering our community, letting people's voices be heard. Take back your community, because if we don't, somebody else will. And that's what we're pushing for. And then I think, as Dr. Jamal and you, Miss Jessica, has also said, we have to educate ourselves, right? We have to get out there and understand who we're voting for. But at the beginning of this, it's about providing the opportunity, opening up the Spectrum Center. Michael Jordan, our owner, has provided resources to our community, and I'm extremely proud of that. I'm extremely proud of our players, how they've taken this on, and we're going to continue. We're going to continue the conversation and move our community forward. But I'm extremely proud about where we're at today and what we have and what we're building here into the future.
Coach JB, our NBA basketball players and people like yourselves, you're influencers. People look to you and for guidance, and to have a team where only one person has voted, and now you have a team full of registered voters. I'm sure that those conversations have been pretty interesting to get your players to that point. Were there some that it was sort of pushback, or was it like, no, I need to go and I need to register to vote? When you had those conversations with your players, what was that like?
Yeah, it was real. I think, the main thing that came out, our players didn't recognize that their vote mattered. At the end of the day, that's what I heard from our players. My vote doesn't matter. Somebody else will take care of that for me, for us, for our community. And our players are now taking ownership of that. They've taken that back. They've empowered. As a league, we're seeing an empowerment. We're taking back. We have a voice. And I've been proud of our players, how they've responded there. And they've just always accepted somebody else is going to do it. That's not my job. It's not my duty. Mm-hmm. They now feel a responsibility, not only for themselves, but for their community. And to your point, the Hornets are a major piece of this Charlotte community. For many, many years, going back many, many years, I believe it's a responsibility we have to our community, and it starts with our owner and on down. We recognize that, and we want to move that forward.
I think that's great that you say that, because it's the mentality of a lot of people that my vote doesn't matter. And so to hear you say that the players are like, it makes it a little bit more relatable. And makes it real for a lot of people. And for them to have that change of heart and get out and understand that their vote doesn't matter, that their vote does matter, I think that's just a wonderful, powerful message that our influencers, our Charlotte Hornets, are sharing with the public. I think it's great that you all are having that conversation.
Yeah, and I think another piece of this that's come out from our players is it's an unselfish act to go out and vote, because we have wonderful lives. I'm very blessed. Our players are very blessed. I can't say we all live comfortable lives, but we have, we're very blessed in our positions. I'm very thankful for the opportunity I have to coach the Charlotte Hornets and be an NBA head coach. I'm one of 30. But other people may not, there's a community, there's a bigger picture here, and it's my job, my responsibility to get out there and vote for them as well. And I think that I've learned that, I've embraced that from our players. I've learned that from them, and hearing from them. This has been a more unselfish act than we went into it thinking.
So speaking of the league, and, as I mentioned earlier, we have been fighting this fight for centuries. It's been going on for the longest. And with the Charlotte Hornets doing such a great initiative as Swarm the Polls, beyond that, Betsy, I want to ask you, do the Charlotte Hornets have any more plans beyond this initiative to remain engaged in this movement?
Absolutely. So I mentioned briefly that if this is a part of a larger initiative, our social justice platform that was newly created. So we're not new within the social justice space. We've been really focused on social justice since 2016 with the killing of Keith Lamont Scott. However, we were not always as intentional and purposeful about putting out in the community what we were doing within this social justice space. So with the more recent killing of George Floyd, we wanted to make sure that we were showing that this is a priority. Social justice is a space that we want to make sure that we're leaders in. And so obviously voting being something that everyone can take part in, everyone can use their voice and get out and vote. That was our number one priority and initiative. Following that in January, we're really excited for some of our additional activations and additional approaches. Economic mobility is going to be a huge focus area that we're going to continue to put in the forefront. We've done some things in the past, but with this now being so much momentum around this cause, this initiative, we want to make sure that we're showing that we're leaders in this space. Racial equity, again, we've been really focused on how we can bring all people together, because just because we look at equality doesn't mean that it's equitable. So really defining what that is and making sure that we're bringing up our local Black-owned businesses. We had a great event that community team member Gabby Sims led, that we brought along our Black-owned businesses and highlighted them in a really different and unique way. Following that, we'll start focusing on justice reform. So overall, we're really excited to continue to focus in this area. And just because voting ends in November doesn't mean that it's done in that chapter. Close. We want to make sure that the conversation stays on local elections and the impact that our local elections have as well.
So, Betsy, for our family that's out there that is engaging in this conversation, like you said, this will be a continuing thing with the Charlotte Hornets. How can people remain engaged and get information about all the great work that you all are doing?
Yeah, so like I said, January, we're going to more formally unveil it. So that's when we're going to start having more information coming out. So for now, we just wanted to focus on the voting, but please stay tuned. Follow us on social media. We're on all platforms: LinkedIn, Twitter, Facebook, Instagram, also our website. So we'll be sure to make an announcement on where to follow us for more information, and join us and be a part of the conversation as well.
Dr. J, I want to come back to you. We have heard the comments like Laura Ingraham, who says, shut up and dribble. And, we've heard those comments come up when our athletes try to speak out about social injustice and what is going on in the world today. If you're, as our historian here today, how did our athletes in the past deal with such criticism?
Yeah, thank you again, and I apologize. I have about 1,000 words of notes now. I'll do the best that I can do to condense. I want to go back just and answer that first question as well. In terms of thinking about sport as a production of knowledge, if we go back to 1867, when we think about the National Association of Baseball Players, they had a strict color line that said no Black players, no players of color, period. If we look into boxing, that carried over. So we use terms today like white privilege. So if you want to see and historicize an example of that, it would be a boxer by the name of John Sullivan, who said, I'm not going to go against and fight against Afro-Aussie fighter Peter Jackson. I'm not going to fight against Afro-Canadian fighter George Gottfried. He had the privilege to do that because the structure of boxing, as rooted in white nationalism, or thinking about an homogenous white nation state or white supremacy, the governance of that nation state provided John Sullivan with the privilege to say, I'm not going to fight these Black boxers because they're beneath us. This is really important because what I use as a counter narrative to this sport as an exclusive production of knowledge is an archive of freedom used by Black athletes against this exclusive structure in sport. So for example, when Jackie Robinson competed in 4 sports at UCLA, was in the Army at Fort Riley as well as Fort Hood, and he would not compete on segregated baseball and football teams. He was called the N-word by people that were of less rank than him. So when we think about him and these buzzwords like integration that we throw up all the time, I don't feel we know what they mean. Jackie Robinson was a patriot. He loved this country, but he was also outspoken. So when we think about Jackie Robinson in the context of Branch Rickey, what baseball wanted was a particular type of Blackness. What Laura Ingraham wanted was a particular type of Blackness that shut up and dribble. We didn't want the Jackie Robinson that was court-martialed because he spoke up on a bus. He was acquitted for that because he was called racial epithets. No. What the structure of baseball wanted was a turn the other cheek Jackie Robinson that would take it, that would take racism in stride. He was depressed. He was lonely. It was a very difficult time for him. So also going back to your first question, people like Ray Norton, who was the world's fastest man, 59, 60, when he went to Scandinavia as part of the Goodwill tours, he said, I was treated better as a Black man in Scandinavia than I was in the United States. We can think of Tommy Smith and Lee Evans and John Carlos and Harry Edwards and the Revolt of the Black Athlete. We can think of the Tennessee State Tiger Bells, the Black women that put American women's track on the map. And Wilma Rudolph talking about being served outside in Ponca City, Oklahoma, her meal, and this was commonplace. We can think about Muhammad Abdul-Rauf. This was not too long ago. He was one of the best point guards in the league. Could have made the second dream team in 1996. But the type of Blackness that he wanted to show, his full ranges of humanity, wasn't accepted then, even then at the time in 1996. He wasn't widely supported, right? So this is why I was thinking about sport as an exclusive structure and production of knowledge, and the ways in which Black athletes consistently throughout time have what I argue an archive of freedom to push back against sport as an exclusive structure of knowledge and to try to show full ranges of humanity. So the moment we're in now is unprecedented. I don't remember exactly what that day was when so many professional leagues and players, and I remember Matt Kemp, for example, for the Rockies played, but Matt Kemp set out, right? So that was an unprecedented sort of moment, but there is this continuum over time of trying for Black athletes to showcase their humanity and that humanity being stifled. The full ranges of it, I would argue.
Thank you for that. And you're speaking to specific athletes and ones that have been in the past. Coach JB, I want to ask you from a league perspective, how does the league, the organization, handle criticism from fans and others who think that sports and politics should remain separate?
One thing is, again, it starts with the leadership up top. You know, our commissioner has empowered, stands by his players, and he's allowed that platform to remain there, and that's not going to change. I think you saw that in the bubble. Obviously, we were not in the bubble when there was a demonstration. But what I can say is that our players feel comfortable in letting their voices be heard. And that's from the league leadership to our owners. And what I can speak to is our current owner. I mean, he wants our players to let their voices be heard. And our players feel empowered to let their voices resonate and be heard. And I don't see that changing with our leadership. And I think a lot of our players aren't sure how to navigate that. This is very complicated for our players. As they try to get out there with our fans and support our fans and be a part of our community. But our players want their voices to be heard. And I think you're seeing it from top down. I'm proud that we work for a league that allows that. And I don't see that going away. So, and I do sense that from our players. As I watch them, as I hear them, they feel empowered at this moment.
What challenges remain? Like what challenge? We're still fighting this, and you all are using your platform to get these important messages out and bring awareness to this. But what challenges do you all still face?
Well, you got to just stay with it. I think the important thing is keep this momentum going. no matter what happens in this election, we have no idea what's going to happen. No matter what happens in the next couple of weeks, we've got to continue this conversation, this momentum that we have. And I think I'm encouraged because I see a young people out there that are driven, and I really look to my kids. I have 3 young kids. I look to our young players. I look to our league. When I've gone out to different demonstrations, protests, I've been encouraged by the momentum we see. And now we have to just continue that. And that's a challenge. That's a great challenge. Can we continue this? And but as I look to our leadership, as I look to our community leaders here in Charlotte, as I look to our owner here with the Charlotte Hornets, they're committed to it, and our players are committed to it. So let's continue the conversation, keep moving it forward. Don't take a play off. As I tell our players, don't take a play off. Don't hope that somebody else does it for you. You go make it. You go get it done. That's my hope, and that's my belief.
Betsy, as the executive director of the Charlotte Hornets Foundation and the senior director of corporate and social responsibility, how much player input do you receive regarding these initiatives that we see, such as Swarm the Polls?
Yeah, we see, a lot of players stepping forward and saying that they want to be involved and they want to give back. We were able to host a couple virtual discussions, and our players were really intently listening on how they can continue educating themselves and, welcoming these conversations, which is truly incredible. And I think overall, as, Coach said, it really is top-down leadership support. So you do see it integrated throughout our players, throughout all different departments overall, and everyone coming together to really make this approach one that everyone is proud of.
What, I know that we didn't, Coach JB, I know that we weren't in the bubble. But there were some players that said that they wanted to sit out or they weren't going to participate. How did your players, how did the Charlotte Hornets and your players and those conversations, what were those like when you found out about those players saying, I want to sit out?
Yeah, we had a conversation with our players and give, Betsy a ton of credit. I've not, said that yet. Give her and her group a ton of credit because they've participated in this education for us, and they're helping continue this conversation in-house. And, look, we're not trying to accomplish and take on the entire world. We're trying to affect change in our own community. And where do we bring the most change? It's in-house. What do we control? What we do as Hornets, and how does that impact our community? So that's been our focus, and really education is at the top of our board. Our players will feel more empowered. They feel more empowered now because of the education, because they're reading more, they're studying more, they're listening more, they're more intentional right now, and that's really where it starts. And so back to your question, I think our players reached out to some of the teams that were in the bubble to figure out kind of what was their thinking. And it wasn't me sort of putting that on them. They wanted to educate themselves. So they reached out to other players that were in the bubble that were a part of these conversations and asked them, what were you thinking in this moment? And they filtered that back to us. They had their own opinions about it. And what I can say is they supported their fellow NBA players, as did we as the Charlotte Hornets. But at the top of our board, Ms. Jessica, we have to continue to educate ourselves. That is the biggest thing. And our hope is to push this forward into schools, into our community. And I believe, as I said earlier, we are committed to this. So, but thank you again to Betsy. She's done a fabulous job.
Speaking of education, Dr. J, sometimes you don't know where to start when you want to learn and research and have the conversation. You don't know where to start. And with you being our expert, our historian, what are some resources and some tools that our listeners can, that our viewers, I'm sorry, radio, I said listeners, but that our viewers can go and research to get more information?
Yeah, it's a very good question. There are podcasts. I don't have any, but a friend and colleague, Dr. Derek White, has and Lewis Moore, who I don't know personally, but respect his work, have a podcast. I can't think of the name of it. There's another scholar, Dr. Rose Davis. I don't know her personally, but I think she has a podcast that can be followed. Archives are doing a much better job of trying to make resources accessible for people. So there, for example, the Stark Center through the University of Texas has digitized at least, I think, 100 or so interviews from members of Team USA, our white brothers and sisters, as well as Black athletes, and everybody else in between. And everybody else in between is very important because and typically the ways in which we think about integration is only on a Black-white binary. And that's problematic. And that excludes a lot of our population. So the Stark Center is one place that if people are interested in primary sources, Sports Illustrated was started in 1954, has something called SI Vault. So if you really wanted to get into the archives very deeply, you could look at past articles from Sports Illustrated in other spaces. So hopefully that answers kind of succinctly your questions. I did want to respond to Coach JB, but I want to respect time.
No, go ahead. You're fine.
Yeah, so I wanted to just say a little bit more just in terms of what we think about of and this is my own bias, I'm speaking for myself, and what make America great again really means. I mean, the Wilmington riots in 1898, whether we're looking at Robert Williams in the state of Monroe, North Carolina, the Greensboro Massacre in 1979, none of that was make America great again. So we have to think about what does that mean historically and contextually. And for sport, there's people in North Carolina, there's people across the country we can think about. One of the best coaches, I think, in basketball history was John McClendon. We don't think about him that way. We don't talk about him that way, but we should. He coached at North Carolina Central. He coached at Tennessee State before the alleged so-called Glory Road game, and I don't say that to disregard UTEP at all. But Coach McClendon was the first coach that led an all-black team to win 3 straight national championships against an all-white team. Why is that important? He did it in the NAIA, but that's important because the NCAA said in the 1950s that HBCUs can't compete in our tournament. So what John McClendon did and another of other athletic administrators, they formed something, an organization that many people have never heard of called the National Athletic Steering Committee, where black people couldn't stay in the same hotel. They faced racism in the hotel. And they pushed for equal opportunity there's 7 things that they listed, but I won't go through them right now. In terms of boycotting, I think people should look at the 1965 AFL boycott, which was a game that was supposed to be played in New Orleans, Louisiana. There were issues of racism in the cab. There were issues of black players wearing cologne, and that would lead to guns being drawn, not being able to get into clubs. And they proposed to sit out this game, and the game was moved to Houston. So these tactics have been effective historically. Lou Alcindor, Kareem Abdul-Jabbar decided to not play in the 1968 Olympic Games. All right, so there has always been a variation, and I think we need to break up these monoliths in terms of how we think about blackness. There's always been a variation of protest tactics and styles historically, and those are just a couple I just wanted to mention in conversation with Coach JB.
And anyone can chime in on this. You know, we're talking about education, which I never really looked at it. Never really looked at sports as a means of education. You know, and I think that that's a great way. I think that's awesome that sports is providing education on such important topics. Sometimes, you know, going back to my question to you, Dr. J, sometimes we get caught up in, I think sports and politics should remain separate. So I'm going to do a Google search on that to help justify that, you know, like how do we begin to get people to do research on the other side? I guess my question is, how do we begin to open people's minds so that they can see the other side and begin to think about the other side of things? I don't know who wants to chime in, but I would love to hear from any of you all about that.
Yeah, thank you for your great question. One thing I tell my students on day one, irrespective of what your political ideological background is, irrespective of who you are and how you self-identify, particularly to your race, ethnicity, gender, sexual orientation, gender, disability, you are welcome in this class. My goal is not to convert anyone. You can walk out with the exact same views as you enter my class, which might be totally oppositional to my views, and I'm fine with that. But at least have an open mind to engage the material. And what I argue is we are in a moment where we have millions of our citizens don't engage the material. I argue we are in an anti-intellectual moment as a nation and as a citizenry. And that is a problem. And we are using mythologies to inform how we think about ourselves in terms of our past as well as our present. Without having read anything, without having taken a course on anything, that's dangerous. And I believe in the same sort of optimism. I don't even know why I'm optimistic, if you will, if I'm being honest with you as a Black man. But I'm optimistic in the same way as my fellow Morehouse brother, the late Martin Luther King. That it's the responsibility of our white brothers and sisters have the same responsibility towards the bend towards justice as Black people, as brown people. I believe in that. But I also believe we need to be educated. We need to be informed. And then you make your own mind up of where you want to go with it, but at least be informed.
Yeah.
That's key. I think that is the key. That is the focus. It is about education, and we've got so far to go. I have so far to go. I've learned so much, and I'm just at the tip of the iceberg right now. And I try to lead that way because I want to be open. I want to be receptive. I want to hear their voice. And I try to look at it from the perspective of, how are they feeling? What has their experience been like? And I think, as a leader, I try to step back and put myself in their position. And same thing for me, when I share my story, where I've come from, my hurts, my pains, everybody experiences that. And can we have the dialogue? Can we listen? And can we value other people in that way? And that's all I'm trying to bring from our perspective here with the Hornets. And I think it's going to resonate with our community, because I really believe our community believes in these players. They believe in this team. And our hope is that we just become a driving force for people's voices out there. But more than anything, for me, I've been honored to listen to the stories, to educate myself, and be a leader that's willing to adapt, to learn, and to be educated ultimately.
And I would say that it's really interesting if you think about it, because a lot of these guys on the team, as soon as they join the Hornets, join the NBA, they all of a sudden have this platform and they have a following, and people look to them and want to hear from them, and they have this responsibility. And so the education piece is just so key. And, huge tribute to Coach JB and to our leadership team for making sure that we provide them with the education. And then with my team within the CSR, corporate social responsibility space, we just really try to continue to educate ourselves. And I said this earlier, but we're only successful because of the great organizations in our community that we're able to learn from, but also help to raise up and shine a light on. And so it's all about collaboration and the conversation and the continuing of the educational process.
And these players are listening, they're being listened to. And I think that's, to Betsy's point, they're being heard right now. Where do you want to impact? Where do you want to be a part of our community? And we're not force feeding that to them. We're listening, we're taking it in, and we're providing them the resources. We're helping them, navigate where they want to see change. Because a lot of us don't know where to start. Back to your question, where do we start? We don't really know where to start. I don't even know where to start this conversation with my players and our players. We just opened it up and started to have dialogue, and we just started listening to each other. From that has come an empowerment through education, and now there's a real interest in impacting our community, and that's where Betsy and her group comes in. And I'm proud again that we have an organization that aligns with our players.
Alex, don't kill me, but before we go to the question in the comment, I do want to follow up with Coach JB, because you said, you all are listening to the players. And as a minority that is in a leadership position, do you ever feel like your counterparts sort of tiptoe around this conversation of what's going on in the world and how it intersects with the sports world when talking to you? Do you feel like they're sort of tiptoeing around that conversation? Because they're like, I don't know if I can't have that conversation. And if you do sort of feel like that, how do you deal with it?
Yeah, I try to surround myself with people that push me to be better, and that's key. I think that's part of it. I want to hear from people. They know I'm open. I'm an open book. I love to dialogue. I love to hear from others. I don't, to be honest, I don't know if they tiptoe around me. And I try not to really worry about it. You know, it's not I don't worry about that. I control what I can, and I listen to the people around me, and I do my best to hear people and not just be around. I really want to hear and listen what people have to say, because that's where change happens.
Yeah.
When you're hearing, you're listening, whether it's good or bad, and that's what we try to do. And I'll also say that the coaches I'm around, the other 29 coaches in the NBA, this is at the forefront of their organizations for the most part. We've continuously had dialogue. How do we be better? How we try to empower each other to keep moving forward, to keep the conversation going, and listening. So that's a big part of this. I feel support throughout the league right now.
I wanted to touch on that because we might have somebody that's in the comments and they're in a leadership position and they feel like they can't express themselves the way that they do. So I think that it's important to hear from you and your position, and how you deal with that. So thank you so much for your response to that question. We do have a question that is coming up in the comments. Let's check it out. So this one is coming from Braxton Winston. Hey, Braxton. He says, there is little doubt that when history books look back at this year, the collective NBA will be looked at as a cultural artifact. While the players were center stage, the entire league response is significant. Coach and Betsy, you are a part of that artifact. How would you describe what it is like to be a part of this cultural moment to your grandchildren so it is represented honestly and accurately?
Wow. Powerful question. That's a strong question. Well, we don't know what the history we'll find out, but I do think this is historical. And I mean, being in the bubble and the platform there in the bubble, the way that the players were empowered, the way their voices were heard, and they really pulled together as one. Whites, blacks, Latinos, they pulled together as one in that bubble, and I think the NBA as a whole. So I do believe this is a powerful moment for our league. Where this goes, I'm not sure. I think history will tell, down the road. But I want my kids, my grandkids, to look back and go, Dad, you did well. Like you wanted to help push the league forward. You listened to your players, you educated yourself, and you were a part of that. And that's my hope. And again, I'm proud of where we're at today.
Gosh, and I'll just kind of echo the same thing that Coach said. And that's just such a powerful statement. But I just feel so lucky that we work for this league that creates these opportunities and allows us to move down this path and continue with the momentum. And that, again, it's just such a holistic community organizational approach, one from leadership and one from a lot of colleagues within the organization and both outside in the community, and one that I'm proud that the league was, at the forefront of this, but I think it really is our whole community and other companies and organizations throughout that's going to, come together. So it's pretty impactful.
We're about to wrap things up, but before we go, of course, at the end of things like this, they always ask for closing remarks. But I like to ask for each of you all to speak to a specific audience. So Dr. J, I would like for you to speak to the athletes, since you're our historian, and what your final words would be to them about what is going on in the world and how it intersects with sports. Coach JB, I would ask you to speak to fans, the people that are sitting up there watching you coach and watching your players do what they do. So speak to our fans. And Betsy, I would like to ask you to speak to the community, everybody that supports and is a part of what is going on in the world right now. And we'll start with you, Dr. J.
It's a very, very complicated question, but I want to speak to the athletes and let you know that you were a part of a long legacy and a strong tradition. What I framed and borrowed from the work of Dr. Tony Bogues as an archive of freedom, of Black athletes, men, women, those that perhaps there wasn't space to identify that they wanted to identify at that time in terms of their sexual orientation and gender. Whether we're going back to Kalinda, a type of stick fighting in Trinidad, or wrestling that came from Senegal, all the way forward to people like John McClendon, people like Rube Foster in the Negro Leagues. You were part of a long legacy and tradition of diverse examples of protest in sport. I'd be happy to speak with any of you more succinctly, more specifically about some of those narratives and how that's played out. But just to continue to speak truth to power, going back just very quickly to the last question, sometimes education comes from unexpected places, like the late John McCain and Republican Jeff Flake, who talked about paid patriotism, what I frame as performative patriotism. Veterans that have been upset in the ways in which we've been using patriotism in a forced type of way in sport. So there's so many nuances in conversations. There are academics like myself that would love to speak with you. You're never alone. One thing I tell my students almost every day, especially in this moment, you're not alone, you are cared for, you are loved, and you have support. And you have support in the academic circles as well. We're here, we're just a phone call, email away.
Thank you. Coach JB.
There we are. To our fans, number one, get out and vote. Get out and vote. The Spectrum Center is open. I know we're not there playing right now, but get out there and vote. Can't wait to have you back in the seats. I miss you guys. I miss you, the fans. So, but right now, what we have in front of us is get out to the polls, get out there and vote. We want to be an organization, a team that you're proud of. And we're doing that through educating ourselves, trying to be better, not only for our team, one another, but for our community. We're committed to that. We're committed to being here. We're committed to this community for the long term. We're in this for the long haul together. We believe in you. We feel that you believe in us. And look, we're going to get better. We're going to get through this. And I can't wait to see you all back at Spectrum Center. Number one, to get, to vote, but then for those Hornet games as well. So thank you.
Thank you so much, Coach. And last but certainly not least, the ladies, Miss Betsy.
Yes, thank you. So to our community, I would say, as JB said as well, go out, vote. Next, just have conversations, start dialogue. Even if you don't know where to start the dialogue, start it with how are you feeling, and continue to educate yourself. If you don't know something, learn, and have empathy and grace for others.
Thank you so much. I am honored to be talking to you all, and I have learned so much. I cannot wait to go and research with all the notes that I have in my phone so that I can educate myself on those things. But we thank you. Thank you so much for taking time out of your busy schedule to engage in such an important conversation. Thank you so much. This was wonderful. And we are going to go back to Ms. Pierce from the Levine Museum.
I see that I'm muted. Don't you love those technology moments? That was a first. Well, I was basically praising all of you and thanking you for your commitment to this community. All four of you are doing a lot here in Charlotte, and it's really important. And we're going to continue being a place that supports all of you and all of your efforts. Dr. J, Dr. Jamal, thank you so much for being with us and giving us such wonderful historical insights. Levine Museum is a history museum, so we always try to ground our conversation with history, and I learned a lot personally tonight as well. We are going to continue some more important conversation this weekend, so I wanted to bring that on everyone's radar. We have a program on Sunday that we're doing in collaboration with a lot of other nonprofits in Charlotte. It is a continuation of the conversation around the Black Lives Matter mural project. And so tune in. We have some artists that actually was part of that mural project, and we're going to talk about the intersection between art and activism in that program. So that's at noon, right before football games start on Sunday. And I also want to encourage everyone. Betsy, you said this in your comments, and thank you. We actually have a relationship with a Black-owned company. They made our No Justice, No Peace t-shirts. When we are done here, Alex is going to queue up a little video about the making of that t-shirt. But let's please support local businesses, especially during this pandemic time. And so I'm going to close out, and Miss Jessica knows that I do this. I always close out with a little quote, and I think I have one that's appropriate based on your conversation. And I'm going to bring us back to the 1968 Summer Olympics, when Tommie Smith, who was just 24 years old, won the 200-meter sprint finals. And he stood on that podium with John Carlos when he got his gold medal with the Black Power salute and the black glove. I think we all know that image in history. It's a very popular one. It was a very important moment. And later he was asked, why he did that. And Tommie Smith said, "We were just human beings who saw a need to bring attention to the inequality in our country." And with that, thank you for everything that you do for the community. And it is presidential debate night, so I know everyone is going to tune over to that. So have a great evening. Until next time.
Thank you.